What is going on, guys? In today's video, I will show you the best DPS tier list in Throne and Liberty. To not waste your time, I've split this video in 4 parts. So I've made 4 separate DPS tier lists. One for PvE, then another one for large-scale PvP, then also one for small-scale PvP, and then lastly, we will have a healer tier list that works for both the PvE and PvP. If you're interested in only one specific activity, then just click on the timestamps. But if you want to experience the whole game, then I strongly recommend to watch the full video. And by the way, to shorten the tier lists, I will include only the best and most popular weapon combos. So if you don't see your build in the tier list, then it's either a tank setup or doesn't have high enough DPS to be in the meta. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So first off, we have the PvE tier list, and the rankings were made by their performance and being the most popular DPS choices in dungeons for open world PvE and boss fights. Number 1. And for the first S tier, we have the crossbow and daggers. This is currently the highest DPS setup in the game, because both of your weapons have extremely high damage. And if you use the right build, then you will consistently reach 20 stacks of Thunderclouds, which will give you explosive damage with your Thunderclouds bombing skill, and you can activate this every few seconds. Crossbow and daggers are both unique weapons in the sense that they are dual-wielded. What makes dual wielding so unique in this game is that for every attack you do with these weapons, there's a chance to get a double hit with their offhand. And to top that off, you can even increase the chance of this by using the selfless diffusion, which will increase your damage from 200 to even 400%. If you're looking for the best meta PvE and PvP DPS build, then the crossbow and daggers is for you. Number 2. Then for the next S tier, we have the bow and crossbow. This setup is only good for PvE, and it can dish out a constant barrage of damage. Because of high bonus damage stacking and these two weapons having the ability to throw out a massive number of hits, the longbow and crossbow players are among the top on the DPS leaderboards. Also, by building up from your skills and passives, you will get low cooldowns and have a very high amount of hit chance, ensuring that you can keep doing DPS for a very long time. Number 3. And then for the last S tier, we have the bow and staff. This setup is a glass cannon that uses passives and skills to do incredible amount of damage from long range. Longbow and staff players build for max range to maximize their passives and gear bonuses. On top of that, you need to manage your cooldowns effectively to do as much damage as possible. So if you want to play strictly at range, then this is the build for you. Number 4. Next we have the A tier, and for the first one, we will place the bow and daggers. In this setup, the longbow provides high single target DPS at range, while the dagger provides amazing passives. This build's pros are that you get really good self-sustain and high single target DPS, but you are very reliant on cooldown speed. So you'll want to make your build around reducing as much waiting time as possible. Number 5. Then for the next A tier, we have the staff and dagger. And as you can notice, dagger is pretty much the best second weapon choice for most builds. So this setup is pretty much a mage assassin, which at his full potential provides up to 200 heavy attack chance and 150 skill damage boost. But because of the high cooldowns in this build, you will need plenty of cooldown speed to reach your full potential, and without it, you will not be as good. So this setup is amazing, but will require decent enough gear to reach the highest damage possible. Number 6. And now finally, for the last meta DPS build, we have the greatsword and dagger, and he will be placed right in the A tier. This setup is the highest melee bruiser that plays like a melee assassin thanks to his passives that can output very high damage. And once you fully max it out, then you can reach up to 300 skill damage boost and 500 plus heavy attack chance. By combining your increased damage from the greatsword with the increased critical hit and critical damage from the dagger, you will have no problem keeping up in DPS, alongside the other S tier weapons. The next up, we have the large-scale PvP tier list. And the rankings were made by their performance and being the most popular DPS options in Riftstone Wars, Boonstone Wars, and other organized GVG content. Number 1. So for the first S tier, we have my favorite, which is the crossbow and daggers. This setup makes you into an assassin that is capable of kitting and doing extremely high DPS. Our most powerful specialization is the Annihilation Barrage Shot, which allows you to do an AoE bombing playstyle that is very strong early on, before players get too many defensive stats. In large-scale PvP, the goal is to dive the backline and try to pick off as many people as possible. So coordinating pushes with your guild and party members is the key to success. Number 2. Then for the next S tier, we have the bow and daggers. This setup is an incredible disruptor that has high damage and can send enemy players flying into the air. You don't have as much spammable AoE as, for example, the staff and dagger users, but you have an amazing AoE skill shot with a wide range. Also, the daggers will boost your offensive stats, which provides incredible amount of escape tools, or even can be used offensively for a guaranteed crit. Number 3. Then for the next S tier, we have the staff and daggers. So, by combining the staff skills with the dagger skills, will make you into a nuker that can delete multiple enemies in a row. This setup for large-scale PvP is purely meant for staying in your team's backline and using roll to stay alive. But if you manage to not die and master the skill, switching between weapons during PvP at the right times, then you will be unstoppable. Also, staff and daggers can quickly cast massive amounts of AoE and deal a lot of damage if you catch enemies off guard. Number 4. And then for the last S tier, we have the bow and staff. This setup is more sturdy as it has more survival tools at its disposal. Similar to as in the PvE, the longbow and staff players build for as much range as possible to maximize their passives and reach up to 30% extra range on your skills. In addition, bow and staff players will get access to flash wave and limit break skills, which will boost your normal AoE skills to a huge amount of DPS. If you want to be the best player in castle sieges and have multiple choices to customize your playstyle for all PvP events, then this is the one for you. Number 5. And then for the last and final setup, we have the greatsword and dagger, which will be placed right in the A tier. With having the ability to engage enemies from over 24 meters and having access to 2 binds, 2 stuns, and 1 prone, there won't be a single player that you can't lock down and kill, which makes this setup the perfect melee assassin for PvP. Greatsword skills will allow you to stack high amounts of heavy attack chance, hit, and skill damage boost, while the dagger's passives will allow you to have a high amount of critical hit and critical hit damage. So, by stacking all of these stats, we'll be deleting enemies left and right. The next up we have the small-scale PvP tier list. And again, these setups were ranked by the DPS performance and how popular they are in the current PvP meta. Number 1. So first off, we have the sword and shield with greatsword, and we will place it right in the S tier. This is your traditional tank, which not only can survive a lot of hits, but in return can dish out a serious amount of damage. You will have to stack a lot of damage reduction and use AoE CCs to catch players, but when you fully build it, the enemy hits will feel like nothing, and in return you will be CCing and completely stopping the enemy in his tracks. Number 2. Then for the next S tier, we have the greatsword and dagger. This setup has multiple different ways of securing kills. Your playstyle doesn't change too much between large-scale and small-scale PvP. So in 1v1s, it's easier to spot the enemy's animation for the AoE stun, and that's why it will be very easy to perform your combos. And finally, to reach the highest damage possible, combine skills from both combos to prevent being stuck while waiting for cooldowns to come back up. Number 3. Then for the next S tier, we have the crossbow and dagger. This setup has your typical rogue playstyle, which, unlike most builds, don't have a main hand weapon. So one weapon should not be used more often than the other. And because of this, both of these weapons work better when their skills and passives are utilized at the right moments. Also, your main skill will be the Thundercloud's bombing, which will provide high single target bursts, so you could delete anyone that crosses your path. Number 4. Next up we have bow and dagger, and we will place it right in the A tier. In this setup, you usually want to have the longbow out at all times. However, during times where you aren't attacking and trying to reposition, then having the dagger out will give you increased movement speed among other defensive stats as well. So, for example, if you reposition and you get jumped or CC'd, then you'll be able to make use of the added evasion and debuff duration. But besides that, this setup is a great range damage dealer that should focus on targeting enemies that most of your party is targeting, and this is especially useful in arena PvP. Number 5. And then for the last A tier, we have the staff and dagger. In this setup, you are not just a glass cannon, but you also get amazing defensive options that provide enough time for your healers to save you in time. Your biggest strength is small-scale fights, where players aren't grouped up too much, so then you can pick them off one by one. As staff and daggers, you're less time-constricted to get right into fighting, so you have time to build up your buffs and then go shut down any spellcaster that tries to hurt you. Number 6. And then for the last and final setup, we have the bow and staff, and we will place it right in the B tier. This setup is mainly used for small-scale fights, like Dominion events or Arena, where players aren't grouped up together too much. As I've already explained, you will use both of these weapon strengths, so you will get great self-sustain, high AoE burst, long range, and high single target damage. However, you will have to be careful and try to stay far away from melee players, because we don't have many tools to escape. And then for the last and final tier list, we have come to the healers. In my opinion, your goal as a support is to keep your allies alive and provide damage buffs, while still at the same time deal as much damage as you can. So here is the performance for both PvE and PvP. Number 1. So first off, in the S tier, we have the Staff and Wand. This is the most versatile healer setup in the game, because you can heal while doing great amounts of DPS. For PvE, this healing weapon combination has stronger and more spammable AoE abilities than any other healer combo, which makes our preferred way of farming in open world and dungeons. While for PvP, the Wand and Staff can achieve the highest cooldown speed in the game, allowing you to spam heals and abilities more often compared to other healers. Because of this setup, you have the Salvation Chain skill that allows you to pull party members from long ranges to safety and freeze enemies to save allies. So, if you enjoy traditional mage builds but also want to heal and support allies for both PvE and PvP, then this is the one for you. Number 2. Then next up in the S tier, we have the Bow and Wand. This setup provides party-wide cooldown reduction while also having bunch of buffs. But because of this, your DPS won't be as high. In PvE, this weapon combination is more known for the utility they bring to a party, in the form of party-wide cooldown reduction, mana regeneration, and critical hit, as well as accuracy buffs. While in PvP, you are pretty much like a cleric that is almost purely healing and supporting your team, unlike any other healer build. Also, you will struggle with mobility in small-scale PvP. However, in large-scale, you will have an easier time because you can position yourself safely behind the team. Number 3. And then finally for the last one, we have the Wand and Dagger, and we will place it right in the B tier. This setup is primarily a support build that revolves around mixing ranged and melee playstyles to ensure that you can be anywhere at any time. Unlike a more traditional support or DPS build, you need to keep a close watch on both allies and enemies to make the best use of your abilities. And by knowing when and where to use the skills for maximum efficiency will make you into an amazing healer. So in quick summary, this is a great setup, although your DPS will be very low, and that's about it. So, if you enjoyed this video, click like, subscribe, and comment. If you're interested in more content, check out my channel, and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy, and peace.